Good day, Algebra 1 students. This will be our last review here before tomorrow's quiz. And just a quick recap of the schedule. Today is Wednesday, April 15th. Video notes. Basically what we're going to do is I'm going to do all the problems from the 9-8 and 9-9 review. There's no guided notes. What I would tell you to do is just have your own paper and then kind of have your homework sheet and then correct any that you miss. And actually, it wouldn't hurt to rewrite them down. To study for the test, I would redo these problems again, or you can go in your book in 9-8 and 9-9 and find some additional problems. I'll be on from noon to 12:30. I'm going to do some additional review problems for tomorrow's quiz that are different from what's on here. So we're just going to pick up, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 of them, and you should be able to follow along and get them correct. Tomorrow, there'll be the 9-8, 9-9 quiz. I'll post it at 8 a.m. and it's due by that night, not the next day, that night by 11:59. And again, you're going to have a slot on there to have it signed by a parent. And then Friday, April 17th, there's no assignment. Okay, you can take that day off and we'll pick back up on Monday. This is the review. Your test will also be 8 questions long. It'll be the exact same format. Different numbers here, different problems. It'll be 4 points each, so it'll be a total of 32 points for the test. Now, let's just go through these. I'd have your homework out. Anything you missed, kind of redo, pause the video, and then find out where your mistakes are. I'll tell you the answers here kind of up front. Number 1 should be -2 and 8. So if you got that, then you're good. So -2 and 8 are your 2 answers. And so right here, to solve it by completing the square, this is where we want the number on the other side. This is always a plus, and we are going to add something to both sides. Now remember that something is going to be, you take the b term. The b term is at -6. We divide it in half, and we get -3 squared, which is +9. That number goes into those 2 slots. Now on the right-hand side, all we do is add those together, 25. On the left-hand side, we're going to factor those. I'm just going to do a little bit of scratch work over here. We want 2 numbers that multiply. Let me do this a little bit on the side. Multiply to equal 9. Add to get -6. Well, that's going to be -3 and -3. Now, some of you will break it apart. And then I get x times x minus 3. Then you get a -3. Divide it, you get x minus 3. You get x minus 3 times x minus 3. I'm not going to do all of this for each one, because once you know those 2 numbers, it's automatically going to be x minus 3 times x minus 3. And we're going to write that as x minus 3 squared equals 25. That's the key right there. We have to have that quantity squared. Once you have that, take the square root of both sides. And now when you take the square root of that, you get x minus 3, and the square root of 25 is ±5. For the quiz, that number there should be a perfect square, so it always should be a whole number. When you take the square root of that number, it is going to be 5, or a whole number. If you don't, that means you made a mistake somewhere. Okay? Now, here's where I'm seeing some mistakes. Some of you are just writing -3 plus or minus 5. You have to move that over to the other side, and you get x equals 3 plus or minus 5. Now you got 2 cases here. 3 plus 5, which is 8, and your second case is 3 minus 5, which is -2. Just don't make a careless error with your math. Use your calculator if you need to. But those are your two answers, -2 and 8 for number 1. Okay, that is completing the square. You absolutely have to follow directions, and you have to do it this way. You cannot do it any other way because of the directions. All right, the second one. Again, solve this by completing the square. All right, number 2, the answers are -10 and +2. If you got that, if that was your answer, you're good. Just follow along, make sure you get them right, or double check it, make sure everything looks the same. If you got something different, some of you had 10 and -2 or something totally different, let's find out where you made a mistake. All right, so you got x squared plus 8x. We're going to have a blank here, equals 20 plus blank. All right, take half of 8, which is 4. Square that. That is 16. That is what goes in those two spots. All right, I need two numbers and multiply to 16, add to get 8. 4 and 4. And on the right-hand side, 20 plus 16 is 36. That becomes x plus 4 squared equals plus or minus, whoops, I'm a little one step ahead, just 36. Take your square root, equals plus or minus square root of 36. X plus 4 equals plus or minus 6. Subtract 4. I get x equals -4 plus or minus 6. Now make sure the plus or minus stays with the 6. Okay, don't put it with the 4. Two cases here. -4 plus 6, which is 2. -4 minus 6, which is -10. And those are your two answers that we said you'd get. So -10 and 2. Okay, number 3. X squared plus 14x equals 15. X squared plus 14x plus, put a blank here, equals 15 plus, put a blank here. The answers, I'm going to give you those now so you can see if you did it right. The two answers are -15 and 1. If you plug in 1, 1 squared is 1 plus 14 times 1, they add up to give me 15. They work. If you plug in -15, you'll get the same thing. Now we got to fill in this spot. You take the whatever's with the x, you cut it in half, you square it. It's going to be 49. Two numbers that multiply to get 49, add to get 14. 7 and 7. 15 plus 49 is 64. That is x plus 7 quantity squared equals 64. Once you got that, take the square root. Now, what is the square root of 64? If you're doing one of the first 4 problems, it better be a whole number. It's just 8. And then when you write this down, the square root is gone. We took the square root. It is just now plus or minus 8. Subtract 7. And you get x equals -7 plus or minus 8. -7 plus 8, +1. -7 minus 8, -15. Okay, just like I said earlier, -15 and 1 are your two answers. All right, one more by completing the square. All right, this has a negative like the very first problem we did. So you got to be careful of that. The answers for number 4 are 3 and 15. Okay, so if you have those, you're good. When we go to do this, you get x squared minus 18x plus, you got a blank in there, equals negative 45 plus we got a blank in there. Okay, take the negative 18 divided by 2, which is negative 9. When you square it, make sure you put parentheses around there. It is positive 81. This number right there is always a positive number. And now two numbers that multiply to get 81, add to get negative 18, negative 9, and negative 9. All right, well, what's negative 45 plus 81? You get 36. Now, if you made the mistake and I put a negative there, and if I did negative 45 minus 81, we don't want this side to be a negative at this point. Later on, when we do some more, it can be, but it won't be for any of the problems we do. So if you get a negative there, again, that's just like an indication you made a mistake somewhere. So we get 36. I can write x minus 9 quantity squared equals 36. Now take your square root. And you get x minus 9 equals plus or minus 6. All right, add 9 to both sides. So I get x equals 9 plus or minus 6. Two cases here. 9 plus 6, which is 15. 9 minus 6, which is 3. And like we said, there's your two answers, 3 and 15. Okay. All right, so first 4 are going to be completing the square. Next 4 are going to be quadratic formula. Okay, so now you got to do both these cases. You got to find A, B, and C. Then you got to use quadratic formula. I am going to give you the formula on the test. It is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, this doesn't say anything about a radical and a decimal. Okay, doesn't, so it means that it should get whole number or fraction answers. Now, I'm going to give you the answer. If you have this, then you know you did it right. The two answers are negative 8 and negative 3. Those are going to be your two answers. Now, as you take a look at here, this is already set up. It equals 0. For quadratic formula, we need it to equal 0. The a is the number in front of the x squared. In this case, it's a 1. B is the number in front of the x. It's an 11. C is the number in front of, or is the constant. It is 24. Okay, so you're going to need to fill in these, and then your answer. This is how your answer key is going to look, or your test is going to look. Okay, so now I got x equals the opposite of b, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Opposite of b, negative 11. B squared is going to be 11 squared minus 4. A is 1. C is 24 over 2 times 1. I would, at this point here, on your calculator, don't worry about the square root yet. Do 11 squared minus 4 times 1 times 24, 25. And if you want it to be a positive number. Okay, this is where we figure out whether we have a decimal answer or just a fraction or a whole number. When you take the square root of 25, if it comes out to be a whole number, we don't have to worry about decimal or radicals. So it's 5. So now that gives me negative 11 plus or minus 5 over 2. So here's your two cases. X equals negative 11 plus 5 divided by 2. Negative 11 minus 5 divided by 2. Well, what is negative 11 plus 5? That is negative 6, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Now, here's where I see some people make mistakes. If you just type it in, negative 11 plus 5 divided by 2, it gives me negative 8.5. That is not the answer I got here. If you use your calculator, which you should, here's what I suggest you do. You either need to put the numerator in parentheses, or just do this, negative 11 plus 5, hit equals. That's negative 6 divided by 2, that's negative 3. So if I do the next one, negative 11 minus 5, that's negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. So I got to make sure I get those two answers. Number 6. Key here, 3x squared minus 11x equals 20. In order to use the quadratic formula, it has to equal 0. So for this case, subtract 20. And you're going to get 3x squared minus 11x minus 20 equals 0. So that means A is 3, B is negative 11, C is negative 20. The answers to this one happen to be negative 4/3 and 5. Well, that's like negative 1.3 repeating, so if you have that as a decimal, that's the same, but I want you to keep it as a fraction. Now, once we have it in this form, we're going to plug it into the quadratic formula. Opposite of B. B is negative 11. So when we're writing the opposite of B, you want to make that positive 11. Plus or minus. Make sure that that is negative 11 in parentheses squared minus 4. A is 3. C is negative 20. Over 2 times 3. All right, figure out what's going to be in the parentheses or underneath the radical. Make sure you put negative 11 in parentheses. Squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 20. 361. All right, that's a pretty big number. And most of you aren't going to know whether the square root of that is a whole number. So go to your calculator really before you go any further and see what you get. It is 19. So that means x equals 11 plus or minus 19 over 6. I'll go over here. So I got 11 plus 19 divided by 6, and then you got 11 minus 19 divided by 6. Well, what is 11 plus 19? That is 30. And what is 30 divided by 6? That is 5. What is 11 minus 19? That is negative 8. Okay, negative 8 divided by 6 is not a whole number, it's a decimal. So we're going to keep this as a fraction, but we do want to reduce it. Those are both divisible by 2. That's where I get negative 4/3. So there's your answer for 6. 7. All right, this is how it is going to look on the test. It'll say radical answer, it'll say decimal answer. It'll give you both spots for that. And here's what your answers are going to be. Now, in this case here, it already equals 0. I'm going to fill in my A is 2, my B is 1, and my C is negative 7. All right, here is the radical answer. X equals negative 1 plus or minus square root of 57 all over 4. The decimal answer is negative 2.14 and 1.64. Now, I said it in the videos and it was on directions before, but you need to round to the nearest hundredth. You need to round the nearest hundredth, which means 2 decimal places. Well, now let's show you how you get those answers. Okay, there's your formula. All right, the opposite of B. B is positive 1. The opposite of B is negative 1. B squared, 1 squared minus 4. A is 2, C is negative 7. Over 2 times 2, because A is 2. All right, we want to see what's underneath the radical. 1 squared. If it's not a negative, you don't need parentheses, but parentheses absolutely never hurt. 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. You get 57. So I got negative 1 plus or minus square root of 57 divided by 4. What is the square root of 57? Square root of 57 is not a whole number. It is a decimal right there. That lets me know I have a radical answer, and that means right here, that is your radical answer. Okay, sometimes it's called the exact answer because there's no rounded off values. You don't need to write that, but that's what sometimes they call it. Now, here's how we get the decimal. It's not a whole number. If it was, we will always write it down like plus or minus 5 or plus or minus 10. It's not. We're going to round this to the nearest hundredth. So go to the third spot. It's a 9. That means that 4 is going to kick up to a 5. So it's going to be 7.55. So this is now x equals negative 1 plus or minus 7.55 divided by 4. And we are going to have our two cases. Negative 1 plus 7.55 divided by 4. Negative 1 minus 7.55 divided by 4. Well, the first one there, what is negative 1 plus 7.55? 6.55 divided by 4. Now, round this is 6.375, nearest hundredths. So it's going to be, look at the 7, you're going to move that up to 1.64. So x equals 1.64. And now negative 1 minus 7.55. And take that answer divided by 4. And I get negative 2.1375. Which is negative 2.14. So we got your radical answer, and now we're going to have our two decimal answers. And it will say that on the answer sheet. It'll list that. So there shouldn't be any questions on when you're going to get decimals. Number 8 as well. This is the one from the review, but this is what the answer key on the test is going to look like on the quiz. It's going to ask for A, B, and C. Well, this is already set equal to 0, so I can go ahead and fill those in. 1. And let me do this. 1. Negative 3. Negative 8. All right, your radical answer is x equals 3 plus or minus square root of 41 over 2. Your decimal answer is negative 1.70 and 4.70. Down to the nearest hundredth. All right, let's go through how to get those. Quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Plug in the opposite of b. B is negative 3. The opposite of negative 3 is 3. Make sure you put that negative 3 in parentheses. And then 2 times 1 right here. Okay, find out what we're going to get underneath the radical. Okay, so we're going to plug in parentheses, negative 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8, and we get 41. Well, hopefully you can recognize that the square root of 41 is not a whole number, but go ahead and plug it in your calculator to verify. It is not. We round this off to the nearest hundredth. So it's going to be 6.40. You got a 3 there. The 3 doesn't round it up, so it's going to be 6.40. This right here, hold on. That then is our radical answer. Since it's not a whole number, the square root of 41 is a decimal. Now we got to find the decimal answer, which now I'd say x equals, I just saw the square root of 41 is 6.40. 3 plus or minus 6.40 all over 2. And so now you break it into the two cases. 3 plus 6.40 divided by 2. And 3 minus 6.40 divided by 2. And now 3 plus. Make sure you hit equals, divided by 2. That's where we get the 4.7, and you can make it 4.70 either way. And then 3 minus 6.40 equals negative 3.4 divided by 2, negative 1.7. And I'll put a 0 on there. Okay. That's our decimal answer. We had our radical answers. Your 7 and 8 are going to look just like this. You're going to have a radical and decimal. The others will work out to whole numbers or fractions. Okay, quiz tomorrow. Upload using Cam Scanner or in a Google Doc. Okay. Upload using Cam Scanner or in a Google Doc for that one. All right, there will be a conference today at 12:30. Let me double check. 12 noon to 12:30. I'm going to go over some new problems just to keep going over quadratic formula and keep going over completing the square. All righty, have a great day.